Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Blima Druker, and I work for HASC Center. I'm one of their area coordinators, which basically, in a nutshell, means I supervise a portion of their residential program. And I'm here tonight giving a session to you on an overview of what it means to enter into the residential system, a little bit about what living in a residence is about, and I hope that, at the end we'll have time for questions. This is obviously a very personal decision, and there's lots of thought that goes into it. Sure.
Do you only HASC residences?
I work for HASC, but I'm going to give you an overview on everything. Nothing that I say pertains necessarily to HASC. It's just where I work. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So, let's start with the meat. Choosing a residential option. You have three options. You have something called a supervised residence. You have something called a supported residence, and you have something called an ISS residence. Okay? A supervised residence today barely exists in a new format. So if you would have asked me about a supervised residence 10 or so years ago, I would have told you that an agency gathers through their intake process a group of individuals who make sense to live together, and they develop a home to meet their needs. That type of situation no longer exists. The state is moving away from those types of residences simply because they're too expensive to run. Those that are currently in operation are going to continue. No one's shutting anything down, but they're not building anything new. So if your child needs a supervised residence, they're going to get in via a backfill, which basically means that when a bed opens up in a specific residence, that's going to be your child's placement. Now, it may not be perfect or as perfect as it would have been if you would have created your own group, but every agency's intake department tries their best to place your child where it makes the most sense. You're placing your child in a supported residence if your child needs the most support possible. So this type of a residence most likely has 24-hour staffing. They have nursing care. They'll have some kind of somebody cooking. They'll have some kind of a vehicle. Obviously, every residence is structured differently, but when you're talking about a supervised residence, you're talking about the most support within a residential system. Okay. Next, you're talking about a supported residence. These are still being created. They are very often much smaller than a supervised home, which is not a bad thing. I actually advocate for smaller groups. I think that it does better across the board for every individual that's living within a residential system. The smaller the group, the better. However, with a supported residence, why are we creating them? Because the agency gets less money to support them, which means that technically somebody that's moving into a supported residence needs less care. Now, what agencies are trying to do, to the best of their ability, is they're sometimes opening supported residence to compensate for supervised placement. So let's say your child needs really a supervised placement. They'll try to put them in a supportive placement if no supervised placement is available, and then maybe later on, in a few years from now, move them if a bed becomes available. It really depends on the needs of your child and where they're holding at that given time. Okay, the last residential option, and interestingly enough, it's not such a residential option, but it is called an ISS. An ISS generally is an apartment. Now, the only obligation that an agency has to you or to your child is supervising what they call safety, health and safety. That is not really defined, so every agency defines it in their own way, but you're talking about operating an ISS for somebody to live on their own who's really needs minimal supports. What you'll get from the state in terms of developing an ISS is rent money, about between $1,200 and $1,300 a month. That's basically the estimate. Also to note, there are some families, if this is an option for you, that have successfully created what I'm going to call, in quotes, an ISS apartment in their own home. So if, let's say, your child wants to live alone, or you have like a mother-daughter house, or you have some kind of an apartment that's within your house, or you're going to create a bedroom with a bathroom and a kitchen, technically you could create that as an ISS apartment, get the funding for it. No one's coming to check on you. No one's really looking at what's going on with an ISS apartment. The state's really giving you the money for your rent. You're providing the rest of your needs for your child. So there's not really oversight. In a supervised or supported residence, there's tremendous state oversight. There's quality assurance. There's tremendous state audits. Every I has to be dotted and every T has to be crossed for your child to live in a residence that is supervised or supported. Give me 1 second and then I'll ask you a question. In an ISS, that doesn't exist because the agency is really not responsible for any of that. They're providing what they're going to call oversight of, health and safety, which is basically made together in a plan with your service coordinator, and then you're getting rent. I just want to make a note. If your child lives in an ISS apartment, you're still entitled to other services. Like, for example, you would be entitled to service coordination. You would be entitled to reshab. So, like in a supervised residence or in a supported residence, you're no longer entitled to reshab because your reshab are your residential staff. But in an ISS, you would still be entitled to reshab. Although, just on a side note, your child technically would be considered max reshab. So, I don't know, like 30, 50 hours a week, depending on, the needs of your child. And agencies, what they used to do before like 3 months ago, was they used to take everybody's hours and pool them. And so let's say like this week, Blima needed 30 hours and Yaakov needed 40 hours. So if I only got 20 hours, because I'm pooling my hours as an agency, I was able to compensate to give you those extra hours as needed, but the state no longer allows that. So they're pretty by the book, with the hours. But you are entitled to it, and you're entitled to the maximum amount since your child is technically living on their own. Additionally, outside of OPWD services, in an ISS, you are entitled to visiting nurse services because in a supervised or a supported residence, you get nursing care, but in an ISS you wouldn't, but you can use visiting nurse services. And you're also entitled to a home health aide, which in a supervised or a supported would be double billing with Medicaid. In an ISS, it's not considered that. So you would be entitled to that. Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick question. You
Sure.
said you get $1,200 to $1,300 a month from the government. Is that above their SSDI?
Yes,
Do you have to file special for that? Or
you apply for it.
you apply?
You apply for it, it's a waiver service just like any other residential program would be. Okay, any questions on that basic information? Okay, so again, residential, any of these options are a waiver service. You apply for it through the front door just like you would any other waiver service. Okay, choosing, go ahead.
Just a question. Is this only for New York or is this throughout the country?
This is only for New York.
So by state it could vary?
By state, it does vary.
Okay.
Some states are ahead of other states when it comes to this kind of thinking.
Which ones?
Baltimore, for sure.
Seriously?
Yeah. I'll tell you, New York went a little bit backwards.
Yeah.
So, so what happened is that, New York saw a need and they provided all this hoopla,
Right.
I want to say, into this, into the needs. And the services were very necessary and parents ate it all up because this is amazing. Whereas the entire time, anybody with a special needs child living outside of the New York area really doesn't know of any of this.
Yep.
So we're a little bit spoiled, and now we're going backwards. And now, unfortunately, we're going to be like every other state out there.
Maryland was really behind. I'm shocked that you said Baltimore.
I'll tell you why. Because They never got 5 steps ahead, but they're more on top of this process now. Sure.
This ISS that you're talking about, if somebody needs someone to come in and check on that, like someone who's higher functioning than you didn't support it, does the ISS provide any sort of oversight?
Yeah.
Or are they supposed to, if it's in your parents' house and the parents are supposed to provide that?
So technically it's not supposed to be in your parents' house. I'm just kind of telling you on the sidelines that things like that have been approved.
Okay.
But technically, if you would read like an ISS apartment, it wouldn't describe that. So I don't even
So
think I
that's
gave you
is
this
there
information.
any support that comes in?
From your res hab.
Okay.
Your res hab. So technically, if you had a child that could live semi on their own or as much as possible, then this may be a good option for you. And obviously, you really need the right res hab staff in order to make it work. That's going to be for another session. Okay. Okay. So choosing the right agency. So I don't know how many of you have been or have gone to any kind of a session on managed care. And it used to be that I was able to give like a whole session on how to choose your agency because you had the power. But there's not really, I don't think with the managed care system, there's going to be all that many options. However, I don't know, I may be talking to you from Adam if you haven't been to a managed care session yet. But you haven't been? No. Has anybody been? Okay, I'm going to give a quick overview because it's really important. Okay, basically, how the new model through OPWD is going to work is through managed care. So what is managed care? Managed care operates, tell me if I'm talking too fast. I just want to get to everything. Managed care operates like an insurance company, okay? So I have my insurance company, okay? And then I have my providers, okay? So your agency has to be a provider to your managed care company that you get associated with. Everyone with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. If your agency that you're associated with is not a provider of your managed care, then you can't receive their services. Understand? Okay.
Can you give an example?
I'm sorry?
Can you give an example?
An example. So let's say Blue Cross and Blue Shield contracts with Dr. Cone in order to provide services. If you want to use Dr. Cone, you could use Dr. Cone. However, Dr. Schwartz is out of network. You can't use Dr. Schwartz. So let's say Dr. Cone is an agency like HASC or Base Ezra or Amaspic or Human Care, etc. If Human Care is Dr. Cone, you could use them. If Human Care is Dr. Schwartz, you can't.
It's like an
Is that-
HMO.
Yes,
And they can
exactly.
switch every year or whatever and totally mess people over?
No. So what's going to happen is that there's going to be somebody employed by the managed care company that's going to do an assessment on your child. This assessment is going to create some kind of a document that dictates what their needs are. Similar to your ISP plan, but different, because your ISP plan right now is a broad view of their needs, but not really their specific needs. Do you remember when you applied originally for waiver services, for some of you maybe a long time ago, that you had to fill out something called like a DDP2, where you explain like, your child, how does your child do in toothbrushing or hygiene, like A, B, C, D? Do you remember that? So this is a remake of that kind of an assessment tool. So based on those needs written in this tool, the agency is going to be able to provide those services for you. If your needs that you want or think that your child needs is not in that plan, then you're not going to be able to access those needs. Okay? To answer your question, every agency has to step it up, because every agency wants to contract, obviously, with as many managed care companies as possible, correct? In order to provide the most people services. Every agency has to have or carry out, they have to prove themselves by doing different assessments, something called the POMS. Do you know what the POMS is? Okay, So a POMS is it's a short for personal outcome measures, which basically anybody living in a residence or anybody attending a day HAB program. So your child is going to get something called a POMS assessment, which is going to determine what their valued outcomes are, what services they're going to be working on. As an agency, if I show progress with my individuals, then I'm a higher rank for the managed care company. So if I don't show progress, then I'm a lower rank. So they'll feed me less clients. You understand? Did I lose
But
people?
once you
It just
have
doesn't
it,
seem fair, frankly, because it doesn't seem like you can, as a mother of a child with autism, I can't cause him to progress more. I can give him every opportunity, but he's going to progress in his own right.
You're not going to have to do that. The agency that
Right,
works
but
with your
if
child
they're-
is going to
But
have
if
to.
they're getting fewer and fewer clients because my child isn't progressing to a stronger and stronger rate, that may deter his ability to A, get in, B, his ability to stay in.
This won't affect your child. What will affect your child is the assessment that's done.
Who's
Okay?
doing the assessment? Someone's gonna come and do it?
Someone's gonna come and do it.
From the
but-
state?
But they're hired by the managed care company. So you tell me, the managed care company that's providing services is also doing the assessment. Are they gonna give your child more services or less services? Think about it. So, I'll tell you, I think from being in this field long enough that the assessment tool is not going to change all that much in the beginning. We change really slow in this process. However, as time goes on, I think that's when you'll see the change. But I don't think that you're going to see such a drastic change, like all of a sudden you get all of these services and then you're given an assessment with nothing. I really cannot see that happening. You know, one of the beauties in this field is that like we change a little often, but we change really slowly. So like things that like we've been talking about my managed care within like the agency process for like I would say like a good 8 years at least, and now we're first getting started on the process. You know what I'm saying? So like even though we talked about it, we scared everybody, we like freaked out, and now we're like, okay, fine, managed care, here we come. You know, that's how the system works. You know, with that. Okay, did I answer everyone's question on managed care? I wasn't giving a session on managed care, but I'm glad I gave that to you because it's very important. Okay, and please, I only gave that whole, piece about managed care in a nutshell. Important to do your homework on it so you really understand what it is, because that's really the direction in which
We
you're
should
moving.
speak to our agency about it?
You should speak to your service coordinator.
Okay.
You don't get to choose your managed care company, do you?
No, no.
So,
If you're not happy with your agency, then you can switch agencies who may be under a different managed
who
care
assigns
company.
the managed care company? The state just randomly assigns managed care companies?
So I'll tell you, right now there's one. There's 3 more in development. I think it's going to play out. I don't think there's really 100% of a plan in action because it's brand new for everybody. This whole thing is, yeah, the whole thing is very brand new. I mean, I'll tell you, I obviously work in the residential system, and they develop this tool, like this new, what I'm going to call this new assessment tool, by interviewing and working with some of the individuals in every residence. Like they took like a cross section, across the board of people that live in the residential system currently to find out what their needs are, how they're met, et cetera, in order to create this assessment tool. I haven't even seen it. I don't even know. I mean, I saw like portions of it, but not like, here you go, here's the assessment tool, not yet. So again, this is not tomorrow, but it's next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like in 10 years from now. Okay, however, getting back to my topic, in order to, I was talking about choosing a residence. How do you choose a residence? So it used to be back in the day that maybe you had all the options and you can kind of shop around. I mean, I remember about, probably 11 years ago, there was a group of parents that approached me with 4 girls about the same age. They all went to seminary in Israel together. They wanted to keep them together. And I literally went with them. We went to 6 different agencies and we said, here we are, we're residents. We want you to develop this residence for these girls. They want to live together. How is this going to work out? We want to be involved in picking a residence manager. We want to be involved in picking which community. That would never happen today. The agencies, not that they don't want to do it, because honestly it works better for them if they do it. If a group comes together and they develop something with them, I mean, what agency wouldn't want to do that? But, I'm sorry?
It's also cheaper.
It's not necessarily cheaper. It's not necessarily cheaper because you're still developing a site, your operating costs are still the same, your staffing ratio is still the same, depending on your supervisor, your supportive rate. It's not cheaper, but it's definitely a lot easier to set up and get going when you're an agency, because you're not taking families that don't know each other or girls that don't know each other. I mean, the transition, the smoothness of the transition just makes a lot more sense. Okay, so whether you get a choice or not, it's still important to understand a few factors. Observation. Important to know your child and important to observe a resident in the agency that you're looking at, in which the resident has similar abilities or disabilities to your child. So for example, if your child is wheelchair bound and nonverbal, don't look at a residence where they're, going out every single night, on recreational activities. Don't do that. Look at something that makes sense for your child so you'll get a better understanding as to what currently exists out there and what that agency is doing for maybe somebody like your child. Okay. Staff. No agency has better or worse staff. They're all the same. The staff that work in the morning in Beis Ezra work in the afternoon at OHEL. The staff that work at night in HAMASPIC work the weekend shift in human care. This is a very small group of staff, and they all work for every agency. It's just how it works. There's not so many from people that want to work in this field in the crazy hours that we need them to work. I mean, think about it. In the residential program, this is what you need. You need somebody to work from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You need people to work from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 11 o'clock at night, and then from 11 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. How many people, think of the pool out there, want or whose lifestyle works for that type of a job? Not many. So we share, we pool from each other, and it works. We've been operating like this forever. Okay, young versus old. Pros and cons. You're going to come into a residence where you'll have some older staff, and you're going to think they're amazing because they're taking care of all the needs of your child. If your child really has specific needs, where let's say they need help feeding or they need showering, they're really like the mommy type staff. The younger staff are not that, because they bring other things to the table, but they're just not familiar with that because that's not where they come from. They are the rah, 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 yay, excitement, go out, creative, come up with all these ideas. So there's pros and cons to every kind. With the older staff, there's less turnover. With the younger staff, there's more. There's pros and cons to everything, but just things to keep in mind when you're looking at a residence and what this all means. Okay, speak to other families. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna make this point and then speak to other families. Don't speak to your friends and don't speak to your relatives. Speak to other families that have kids within the agency that you're looking at. And not just one. Because you get only one perspective, it's not the total perspective. Speak to more than one. I just want to interject here for a minute. When your child does move to a residence, or if you find that this is the right option for your child, parent camaraderie is extremely important. It's huge. It's huge. It helps with, sorry, you guys lost?
Sorry about that. No, we're going to turn it back to talk about, sorry.
No problem. Welcome to stay if you want. Okay, so parent camaraderie, huge, because it's helpful for you to know, like, think of back in the day, or maybe not, like your child is in a classroom, and you want to know, like, is this issue that my child's talking about or that I'm thinking is going on, is it her issue? Is it his issue? Is it the teacher's issue? You don't really know. You have to do a little homework, and you don't want to be like this parent that calls the principal every 5 minutes like, Rah! It's not going to work like that. However, if you call up a parent and you say, my child is having this issue, do you know anything about it? Can you help me with this? So parent camaraderie is very big when it comes to this. You're developing connections and potentially connections for life. So it's not just with the staff or the manager or the agency, it's really with the parent body that you're going to be associated with. Okay. Okay. The residence manager. A residence manager of a group home has a huge job. They're basically in charge of everything from soup to nuts. They work 24/6. They're in charge of hiring, firing, every social need, every behavioral need, every medical need, everything goes through them. When there's a problem in the house, everyone looks at them. There are some awesome residence managers and some not such great residence managers. However, I need you to keep in mind when choosing an agency that they're an employee. So don't pick a residence based on a residence manager because they're an employee. They don't live there. You know what I'm saying? Like I had one parent who called me and she said, I'm moving my child to this residence. The manager is awesome. And I'm like, that is the worst decision in the world because that manager is only an employee. She could get fired or leave tomorrow. You pick the residence because you think that that's the best placement for your child, not based on the manager. Now, it's hard to think like that because the manager could really make it or break it for your child. But you shouldn't pick a placement because of a person. Go ahead.
This model of the manager and staff, is that just with the supervised and the supported?
Yes.
So the ISS is it living alone, or there could be a few individuals that live together in an ISS apartment?
So there could be a few individuals. It's a little bit complicated to do it like that because you have to think of who's going to provide the oversight. So if there's one family member or two family members, two different families that are going to work together in order to create an opportunity for their children, then great, go for it. But who's ResHab staff? It could be a little bit complicated.
Talking about all these things, that's the supervised or the supported.
Supervised or supported staffing. For an ISS, it's only ResHab. There's no agency involvement other than that. So there is no oversight, in that area. I'll tell you, recently I had a family approach me about whether an ISS apartment is appropriate for their child. However, their child has severe diabetes and he can't manage his medical needs on his own. So technically, he would be a perfect candidate for an ISS, perfect, because he really doesn't need all the support staff that a supervisor or supportive would provide.
But he needs supervision.
But he really needs nursing care. He really needs nursing care. So I encourage them to start in a supported residence and then to kind of see how it goes. But I didn't think that starting in an ISS for somebody just moving out without that support was a smart idea.
So a Medicaid coordinator could lead a parent down which path, could give guidance in figuring out which path is best, correct?
Yeah, I mean, technically they should. Go ahead.
What is ISS staff? I walked in late. What does it stand for?
So individualized supported service or something like that.
So how does that differ from a typical group residence?
Very different. In a nutshell, there's no oversight. You're given rent, and the support system that's involved in that is your ResHab staff, is your MSC. You're entitled to a visiting nurse service, which is not an OPW service, and you're entitled to technically, if your child qualifies, a home health aid, which they wouldn't qualify for in a supervised or a supported residence. So
It's the first time that I'm hearing that term, ISS.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Factors that will impact your child. I want to give you some tachlis. I have no idea what. Will you give me a heads up on the timing? You'll keep me good? Okay.
Quarter of 9 almost.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to try to finish as much as possible. Okay. So, important information for you to know or for you to look at when you're looking at a residence. Staffing ratio. Okay? Very important. Think about your child, think about what they need, look at the other individuals and what their needs are, ask what the staffing ratio is, ask how they got to that, and ask what your kid is going to get out of that staffing ratio. Okay, you have to think about other ways in which your child is going to spend their time. Work, day hab, school, how is that going to factor into their residential life? Transportation. Does the residence have a van? Can your child use Accessoride? Valued outcomes. I touched a little bit about this when I talked about managed care and the PALMs, but you should know that your child is going to get an assessment called the PALMs, which is going to determine what their valued outcomes are. Now, valued outcomes are basically any outcome that they desire to achieve.
Like the goals on at a CSC meeting. But.
Exactly. But more geared towards their thinking. You're not talking about hygiene skills. You understand what I'm saying? You're talking about what they want to accomplish, not what we want to do to help them. That a residential staff should be doing anyway. That's not what we're going to bill for. Did you have a question? I'm sorry?
No.
You're good, okay.
Just a quick question.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Based on what you just said, so what about parental input? I mean, do they dictate everything?
Okay.
Or-
So there's a balance. With the PALMS assessment, they're going to assess your child, and you are going to have input into that as well. There are lots of conflicts between what your child wants and between what you want very often. I've seen it. And if you have a good agency and a good MSC and a good team, they'll help you come up with something that makes sense, all around. If you have something specific that you want to address on that, we could talk about it afterwards, if you have a specific thing. Okay, funding. You need to know where your child's funding source comes from. SSI, SSD, SSA, they all provide different things. So, for example, if you are receiving SSI currently for your child, if they will live in a supervised or a supported residence, you will no longer see that money. Basically, what will happen is that money goes to fund the residential program, and your child sees a very tiny portion of it, and that's how that money is spent. Okay? Additionally, if your child is working and makes over a certain amount, then their SSI will decrease. In order to make up for that difference, for your child to live in a residence, your child will have to pay what most agencies calls rent in order to make up the difference of that SSI money in order for them to keep that placement. Am I good with everybody? We're good?
Does that apply to the ISS also?
No. In an ISS, your child keeps their whole check. I'll tell you,
Even
if they
they're
move,
working, they still, the rent is still
so
coming.
if they have SSI, their check will be decreased. Same thing based on this formula.
But not
If they have SSD, no, their money stays the same. So you have to see what
What is SSD?
Social Security of Disability. Some people have one, some people have the other based on parents, based on jobs. Like there's different ways in which you.
SSI is the more famous.
More common. Most people have SSI. Most people have SSI.
In another class, they said SSD is if a parent passes, then the child's entitled to.
Or if the parent collected disability. I mean, there's a few different categories as to why your child technically would receive SSD. But if your child gets SSD, that's an unchanged amount.
In these circumstances, is it best that our child not have any income in his or her name, or does it not matter?
Technically, it won't matter.
Okay.
Unless the income is set up in like a special needs trust.
And
Then it won't apply.
What do you mean?
So if your child has money in a specialized needs trust account, then their SSI won't be affected by that money. So they could have as much money in that trust account as they want. Their services won't be affected at all.
The ISS, the rent money still doesn't change, even if they're working and the SSI is decreased, the rent money will.
It's constant. Okay. Also, your child may receive food stamps now. If they move into a supervised or a supported, that also goes to the food budget for the residents. Your child, technically will see it, but won't necessarily swipe their card. The agency does that. If they live at an ISS, they will have access to that food stamp money. Okay. There is an awesome link on the OPWDD website that will lead you to the personal allowance manual. In my office, it's like yay thick, but I think that it's important. It's good bathroom reading. So it's good to go through it so you have some kind of an idea of what the agency versus what your child has to pay for. So
What did you say it was again? Personal what?
personal allowance manual. It basically will determine from a monetary sense what the agency is responsible to pay for versus what your child is responsible to pay for. So, and it's on the website. It's like maybe 300 pages. You could download it, but it's good to go through it when you have some time. It's an easy read. It's an easy read, and it's also a good reference when you have a question. I use it all the time. If I have a question about something, I always refer to it.
Is there some way to pick up a hard copy or you have to download it?
I don't know. I don't think they do hard copies anymore. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Let's move forward. You want to understand your child's medical needs, understand their psychological needs. Ask where they're going to get who their doctors are going to be, where they're going to receive their clinical appointments, clinical skills. If your child needs OT, PT, speech, ask how are you going to provide this for my child? So you get the total picture of what this is going to look like. Okay, home visits. You want to know Shabbosim, Yontif, Chol HaMoed, summer trips, July 4th weekend. How is this all going to work? I'll tell you, it used to be that agencies worked on something called monthly billing. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but it used to be, there was a system where your child had to live in a residence for 22 days out of the month, and if they weren't there for 22 days, then the agency couldn't bill, and it was complicated. They don't do that billing, they don't work with that billing cycle anymore. Now they do daily billing, which is actually better for your child. However, residences and agencies are still very extra cautious when it comes to things like this, because technically, it was a big step. It was a huge change. Technically, with monthly billing, where we billed 22 days, it kind of made sense for an agency because your child had to be, in a bed for 22 days out of the month in order to bill for the month. Like, that makes sense. But now with daily billing, technically, you could bill for them being on what I'm going to call therapeutic leave, which is like they're away with their family, or they're on a summer vacation, or they're on a trip. So technically, your residents could bill for July and August with your child being away and not sleeping in their bed.
You can.
I'm sorry?
Like you're in camp.
Like you're in camp, exactly.
They don't go to bed for that?
I'm sorry?
They would hold the bed?
Yes. Yeah, we could still bill for it. We bill and you make money it's called therapeutic leave. So, but I'll tell you, agencies are very cautious about this because they don't want to be turned to in a year from now or in 2 years from now and say, Blima Druker, I see every summer she goes away. She doesn't need that placement for the summer. Let's give her bed. Let's give it to somebody else who doesn't have a placement but can use a 2-month backfill, a 2-month break. So even though it's allowed and we do daily billing and it works and every agency makes money and they bill that way, agencies are very cautious because this is a brand new system and they are concerned about how it could bite them later on. So I think that you could see it from both ways when you understand the billing process, because to go from one extreme to the other, it's great for your child, but it makes an agency very nervous as to what the future will bring based on this documented information. Okay. Okay. Other individuals in the residence. This is so important. I can't stress this enough. So many times you have a child who's living at home with their family, who's Baruch Hashem, I want to say stable in every way. Behavioral, medical, clinically, like everything is going fine. You want to put them in a residence, you want to give them a great opportunity, you want to give them some more independence. However, there's a nuance because your child is now moving from living at home with you and your family and siblings that have very high tolerance for whatever their needs are, to living with other kids with hypersensitive other behaviors and other issues, and your child is going to react to that. 100% your child is going to react to that. The question is, how? You are not going to know that, but you need to know who else is going to be living in your child's residence in order to make sure that you could assess in the best way possible how this is going to affect your child. You're not going to be able to prevent it, but you need to know a little bit about, or to predict a little bit about what's going to happen, and you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. Like, my kid is timid and quiet and doesn't say anything, and there's somebody really loud that's going to be living next door. How is my kid going to be able to handle that? And you know what? Maybe the simple answer is that they need a noise machine. Maybe that's the simple answer. But you need to have a plan, because otherwise people get flustered and nervous, and it goes from like, okay, let's try to make this work, to it's not working. And in this situation where you may or may not have a choice for your placement, but you want to make it the best possible scenario, then it's important to be creative and have a plan for these things.
Does the residence manager help with this?
100%. 100%. 100%. However, don't forget, they're going to also have to learn who your child is. No, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but yes, 100%. And I'll just, on a sidebar, if your child takes, let's say, some, I'm going to call psych medication or something to keep their behaviors intact, technically, most likely, your child will need some adjustment with those medications when they transition to a group home residence with other people that have different behaviors. I've seen it happen time and time again. Will it decrease and will it get better? Yes. But sometimes a child needs that extra help of what's been going on with them in order to get through that transition phase.
So if one's child is seeing a private doctor for this kind of thing, an expert, if you will, in that field in psychiatry, it's the parent's responsibility to make sure that they go to that doctor. It's not the agency's responsibility.
Okay. If your child is living in a supervised or supported residence, it is the agency's responsibility to make sure your child goes to that doctor. If you want to,
even if it's far away.
So usually what agencies will do is that if it's very far and they could do it, then they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
However, if eventually they can't and they know that they're going to require that change, definitely, I can't say there's one agency out there that wouldn't do this. Through the transition period, usually they keep things like that in place.
Because that's just going to mess it up even more.
Correct. Right. You know, I think that agencies will go above and beyond to make sure that that transition happens, especially with that kind of a doctor. Okay. Okay, and last item I want to talk about on this topic is also a single room versus a double room. In some residences, you get your own bedroom, and in some, you share, and you have to figure out how your child is going to react to that. For some people, love it. Some people love it. Some people, it's like the worst thing in the world for them.
You have a choice.
So, look, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. But sometimes you have to make a difficult choice. So let's say you have a great residence, and the one downfall is a shared bedroom. Maybe you want to give it a shot. If you have a residence that you don't think is going to meet the needs of your child, and there's a single bedroom available, maybe you want to give that a shot. Everything is a choice. You know, I can tell you though that you should be cautious with your choices, because agencies that provide placement, they're going to work with you. But if every time you say, oh no, I don't want this, and oh no, I don't want that, like there's very few beds. We don't really have so much of that flexibility. So, you know, an agency might get the impression, or sorry, not even an agency, what am I talking about? OPW may give the impression, oh my gosh, this person was already on 6 proposals, and it never went through. Let's choose somebody else who's actually going to want a bed. You understand what I'm saying? So you should make good choices, but be careful with what you choose.
So the question is, for me, how do I protect myself as a parent and my child? Because it really seems like I'm being put in a position, with all due respect, that
Yeah, sure.
I've got a child, this child has needs, it's no one's fault. State has money, but not enough money.
Right.
So who's going to watch out for my legal rights and for my child's legal rights unless I hire a lawyer? Because it sounds like
Okay.
it's going to be very complicated, and is that something that
Okay.
people do?
So, so let me take a step back. I don't wanna sound negative in any way, but you don't really have rights in this case.
Okay, so basically it's just,
It's
you're stuck.
It's not that you're stuck. It's based on your child. So no one's hiring a lawyer because their child's not getting needs met.
Well, if I'm waiting for somebody to give up a bed and he requires a bed, then yeah, his needs aren't getting met, with all due respect. If there's no bed available and he needs one,
No, because, does his plan say that he needs a residential
I have
placement?
no idea. I mean, I'm not talking about
Right.
now, I'm looking down the line.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that you have to look at it from a different perspective.
Which
You have to look at it from the perspective of, there's 15 beds that are gonna open this year. If one is right for my child, then I know, and this is a decision, I'm gonna take that option. You know, very often, you should know that if you wanna work with a specific agency, then sometimes a parent will take a placement that may not be the greatest, knowing that in a couple of years from now, like the agency will say, oh, I think that when this residence has an opening, we'll move your child there because that's going to be better for them.
And does the residents have the option of saying, we can't handle your child, we need to move them?
Within their residential system, so it will happen in severe cases. They're not going to say, we can't handle your child, take them on. They're not going to say that. But they may say, you know what? Now that we know your child, this residence can't meet their needs, but however, this residence may. And you may or may not agree. But if you have an agency telling you that this residence can't meet your child's needs, I would go with them because you shouldn't say, oh yes, you can.
No, of course not.
You know what I'm saying? So whether you're comfortable with that or not, it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot because from an agency's perspective, they know their staff. They know their managers, and they know the other people in the houses. So on some level, you do have to trust where they're coming from after they get to know your kid. And it is so hard to do that because they're strangers. They're strangers. So, but at the same time, they're also operating from a professional standpoint, and you have to give them a little bit of that credit. Go ahead.
And your kid gets into the home and then they start crying and calling you every day, Mommy, I hate it, I want to come home. Like, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with
Yeah,
that.
a lot
But
of
once they
experience.
come home for Shabbos or Yom Tov, how do you get them to go back? Like, my other kids say to me, Mommy, if this ever happens.
Okay, so I'll tell you, it's, number one, it's about being ready from your perspective and theirs.
What if they're not ready? And you are.
Well, yeah, then the question is, do you think they'll ever be ready?
Okay.
And if the answer to that is no, then you're going to utilize the help of your agency to work with that. Meaning every agency, this is not a new issue. This is
I'm sure it's not a new
It's
issue.
not a new issue.
I'm sure it's not.
So if you are going to work with the agency to say, I need to make my child happy here in order so that they want to stay here, we're going to work with you. But if you're saying, I don't know, was this the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? And your kid is going to pick up on that energy, the agency is not going to be able to do all that much. It's going to be a situation where you're going to have to really collaborate with them in order to help your child. And in order to do that, you have to be really strong about your choice.
Are there visiting hours for family members?
So I'll tell you, every agency operates differently. I could tell you in HASC, we don't have visiting hours. You come and visit whenever you want.
Oh, you can.
Yeah. This is your child's home, and this is you're their parent, aunt, uncle, whatever.
Siblings, right?
Yeah. The only thing that I think they usually do ask is just that you call. Like, although, I don't know, I have one residence manager who loves when parents just pop by. She's very proud of the residence she runs, which is amazing. So,
What
What's the length of time to be on a waiting list to get into a residence?
Oh gosh. So it varies. I'll tell you why. Because we're not developing homes.
Right.
So it could be from 1 week to 10 years. It really depends when that bed becomes available that makes sense for your kid.
Now, when the bed becomes, you can still have a right to turn it down, but you don't get put on the bottom of the list, right? We've been on a list 5 years.
I'll tell you, it depends. It depends on the needs of your child.
Right.
That'll really there's something called like a priority 1 list. If your child is on that priority 1 list, then you'll get a first placement no matter what. And also something very important that you should know is that even though you should, if you're looking for residential placement, you should put your name on every list with every agency and become familiar with every intake department. However, even besides that, you should know that the intake departments talk to one another. They're not enemies, they're friends. You know, like Miriam talks to Leah, and Leah talks to Hannah, and they say like, okay, we have an opening for, you know, a residential bed, you know, for somebody who has autistic, you know, we need somebody who has autistic tendencies, who, you know, is a little bit like this. And they'll say, oh, you know what, I have somebody perfect on my waiting list, you know, why don't you interview them? So, you know, obviously an agency will look at their list first, but if they have a bed and there's nobody on their list that technically meets that need, then they'll outreach. They'll outreach, and everyone does for each other. They really do.
What is that priority 1 list you were talking about, and how do you get on that?
So you don't get on it. It depends on. It's based on the assessment. So like, let's say, if your child is, God forbid, homeless, if you have a child if you have a parent that's sick and in the hospital who needs an emergency placement. I mean, you're talking about like a child that really needs to be placed immediately, where no matter what the opportunity is,
They need a bed.
they're going to take it. They need a bed. So that's called a priority 1 list. So when a bed becomes available, because the state is closing down their DDSOs, which are state-run residential facilities, so there's lots of people that need beds because they're closing all those down. So what happens is that certain individuals, based on their needs, get put on this priority 1 list. So, and you know what? Somebody can move, unfortunately, from like a priority 2 to a priority 1 in 1 day, because depending on the needs or the situation. So the list fluctuates all the time. You know, once you are on a priority 1 list, you're not really getting off the priority 1 list until you have a placement. So if you fall in that category, then you don't have to worry about like another person joining and you losing your slot. But it's for a real like emergency need. Okay. Okay. Let me just do a quick like what an agency is going to ask of you. Am I good? Okay. Okay. Obviously, all agencies have different policies when they go through their intake department. When you go through their intake department and what they ask for and what they try to get to know about your child. But in a nutshell, this is the list.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
You're talking that once you have found a residence that has a place for a child. This is the intake that you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Let's say Baycesser calls you and they say, Mrs. Cohn, we think we have a potential placement for your child. This is it. Okay? There's going to be an initial interview, which is going to include your child, a psychosocial, a psychological, a current medical, a potential home visit, school visit, work visit, day program visit, meaning an agency is going to want to see your child in some kind of an environment other than an interview. So any one of those could be. Communication with a medical professional, most likely not anyone but a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And that's not because, it's not, God forbid, because they're fishing for information about your child. I don't want you to think like that. It's because they're trying to make sure that whatever situation the residence is going to offer, it's going to make sense for your child. Okay, your child's diagnosis, their personality, their behaviors, and that includes, you know, behavioral behaviors, and also, you know, their specific needs. Medical needs, social skills, and their care, like how they would determine staffing technically, based on, those type of care needs. So in a nutshell, that is an intake process. Some agencies are do everything, and some do, very minimal. Okay. At the end of the day, I'll tell you, an agency is really looking for, can we work together as partners, and can we collaborate together in this endeavor? When you place your child in a residence, when you make that decision, you're really marrying your agency, because you are going to become a partner with them in raising your child. And that is a huge adjustment. Huge. It's huge for the agency, it's huge for your child, and it's huge for you, because you are going to go from raising your child alone to raising your child now together with an agency. And like I said before, the agencies are strangers. You don't know who they are. Okay, now you know me. So when you come to the HASC hallways and you see me, I hope that you're going to all wave. But I'm only one person. So, I'm talking. You don't trust me. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me.
You actually have a very good impression.
Okay. Okay, so give a double wave. However, you're creating a partnership for life with an agency who you're going to collaborate on one of the biggest aspects of your child's life together with. So there's lots of things that goes along with that. Number one, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. There's going to be mistakes, and no group home is perfect. They're not perfect. But I do believe that they are going to try the best to make your transition as smooth as possible. Okay. Important to recognize, obviously, that you're coming from two different angles. You're coming from the angle of having known your child from birth till however old they are, and now the agency's coming in. They know nothing about your child. However, they have a different perspective. They're coming in with the perspective of, your child is now going to live in a group home residence, and we want to help them grow and flourish. And you're going to meet someplace in the middle. You are. You're going to meet someplace in the middle. Also, very important to recognize is that you're doing this for one child or two children or perhaps three children, and an agency is doing this with hundreds of families for hundreds of children. So you have to be patient with their, with how things work. Every agency operates differently when it comes to things like that. Okay, I'll tell you that from my experience, there is a 2 to 3 year adjustment from the time. Yes, from the time your child moves into a residence until things are good. There's lots of things that happen. There's lots of change. It's a big process. What happens on Yontif? This person's going away, that person's not. Do I stay at home? Oh my gosh, what do I call a home? Is my bed at home still my home? Is this my home? My clothing in my closet. Do I pack everything? Do I leave some things at home? It's a huge change. I mean, it's very different if any of you are at the stage of life that have children that have grown up and, went to a dorm in college or spent, a year in Israel. They're excited about it. They're excited for the new opportunity. For your child with a disability, this is really scary because it's very different from anything that they've ever done until now. So it takes time. It takes time.
That's what I'm saying, once they come home to visit, how are you gonna get them back? I mean, it's not gonna be...
It's not gonna be easy. What your agency is gonna have to do is they're gonna have to make it better for your child to live there. And they're gonna have to figure out how to do that.
If they like ice cream, let them have ice cream for dinner. I made that up.
But I'm just saying, they're gonna have to make it worthwhile for them to live there. They're gonna have to,
For them to want to go back?
Yes, they're gonna have to make it exciting. They're gonna have to make them recognize, and they may not recognize it at first, but they're gonna have to make them recognize that it's awesome to live with peers. That's the normal way. You don't live with your parents forever. It's okay. You could live with friends.
Excuse me, how do you convey that to a child who's mentally limited?
So it's not necessarily conveyed per se. It's shown. It's seen by example. You visit other homes. You see people have a good time. That's why I'm saying that it's not in one Shabbos. It takes 3 years for a child to really feel like, you know what? I'm good. And it's amazing because I've watched the process and I've watched it start off horrible. Ma, please, crying, da 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 da. You know, like, you're leaving me, you're sending me away, and the parents are in tears. But if you stick with it and you think that this is a good choice for your child, it works out. It works out. I'm gonna live to say that I've seen lots of people go through the process and it works. It works.
Yes, I would say from experience, I have a brother in a woman, and he comes home for Shabbos, and he knows if he wants to come home the next time, he better behave this time.
Okay, see, everyone has their methods, you know. you do what works for your child. I personally, I'm not the biggest advocate of using home as a reinforcer, because I do feel like they should be able to go home. But maybe you're for your brother that, you know, I don't know him, but maybe that works for him, you know, and maybe he does need that type of a structure. Okay. Okay, I just want to conclude with a few things. Okay, obviously there's pros and cons to every decision, and you just have to weigh them. You have to figure out what the balance is, you know, based on you, based on your child, based on when, based on what else is going on in your home, based on your other children, based on, I don't know, your sick mother that you're taking care of. You know, there's lots of factors that get taken into account over here. I think that you should also, I want you to understand and take away the message that every agency out there, they're trying their best. A lot of times they're strapped by like rules and regulations and the system and the state, but every agency is working let's just put it this way. They don't want to make you unhappy. They want to make you happy. They want to work with you. Every agency believes that a parent is a partner in raising a child. So they want to make it work. You have to sometimes figure out how the best way is to work with whoever you're working with. Your community plays a huge role. And I'm not saying where you live, I'm saying where your group home residence is, in terms of people going out for Shabbos, a shul being welcome, people on the block. I mean, it's such a huge part. I mean, I have seen some awesome residences soar and be so successful because of the block or the community that they're on, and some really struggle because they have no one from the community to pull to offer those opportunities to the people in their homes. And it's not because the residence manager or the agency is not doing their job, it's because it's just so much work to get other people to work with them. And it's important to understand that the community plays a big role. I don't know if any of you have gone to a session on what a circle of support is. In a nutshell, a circle of support is basically anybody centered around your child that cares about him or her, that may be able to give them opportunities. So, for example, maybe within your child's circle of support is Yankel, the flower man, that your child picks up flowers from every Shabbos, you know, or every Friday, I should say rather, because Yankel and your son Chaim made a connection, and so Yankel really wants to maybe help Chaim be successful and maybe help him get a job in a flower shop one day. You understand what I'm saying? It's very important for you to figure out like what this is all about. You know, like you have one child. Your focus is how to get him or her the best life with the most opportunities possible. And you need to maybe reach beyond the other siblings, your aunts, your uncles, and see who else is out there that can maybe or want to benefit your child and see what they could help you with. You're not talking about, you know, lots of people have things going on in their lives. I'm not talking about a time commitment. I'm talking about a conversation. This is where Chaim is stuck. You have any ideas? A circle of support is huge, and it's something that you should really all be thinking about for your child. Give me 1 second, I'm going to finish, okay? Lastly, communication and respect are key to any kind of relationship. You are building a relationship with an agency, not your friend, not a spouse, not a sister. So just think of even more so, if I could give you a takeaway message, it's that. It's really, you're working on building a relationship with an agency. It's very different with a specific person. However, the key tools, that communication and respect, are still the most important factors in that relationship. And don't forget, at the end of the day, they're helping you take care of your child. So that back and forth is huge. It's huge. Okay, I'm going to conclude with that, and feel free to ask me what you got. Go ahead.